Howdy, folks. It's time for the last in the series. I'm so excited for our last workshop of the winter off-season series here with Dirtbound. It's pretty exciting to be able to share all of this with you. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about adaptive mountain bike joy. I'll go a little over about who I am and what I'm about, but I do want to remind folks that we have the chat, and there might be some points during this conversation where I ask some questions or, get some feedback. So please use the chat, and also let me know if you can hear me. All right, great. Let me go ahead and turn the music off and we will get started. Great. Well, welcome once again to the last, as I said before, the last workshop in our series here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about adaptive mountain bike joy. This channel is brought to you by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. And it's also brought to you by my organization, Dirtbound. And what's Dirtbound? Well, Dirtbound is a para off-road cycling initiative that aims to empower, develop, and support para off-road cyclists. A little bit about who I am. And if you've been sticking around for all of these, you're like, we know who you are. We've been watching this series. My name is Annika Wade. I'm an adaptive athlete. I'm a full-time wheelchair user. I ride both mountain and gravel bikes. I advocate for Black, Indigenous people of color, and individuals with disabilities in the outdoor space, mostly in the cycling space. I'm also a geospatial professional, and I work with satellites. So why did I create this workshop, and what is this workshop all about? So as you know, I am an adaptive mountain biker, and I acquired my disability a little less than 4 years ago. And my disability was actually acquired in a mountain biking accident. So I've had experience both, being an able-bodied mountain biker and cyclist, and now a para off-road cyclist or adaptive mountain biker and cyclist. So I've had a lot of experience kind of in both sides of the world. And when I think about, why I come to cycling and what I'm interested in cycling, it's often to, find a sense of peace in the outdoors. It's to feel joy. It's to connect with nature. It's to feel at peace. But oftentimes when I'm in the outdoors and when I'm riding with folks, people are always asking me questions. People are always trying to help. People are stepping in. And sometimes that can take away from the experience of me just experiencing joy in the outdoors. So one of the things that I've noticed quite a bit is when I show up to a ride, a group ride or an event, people always ask or assume that I need help. Because I may need a support rider in certain circumstances, people just think that, a person with a disability is going to always need to have help or have assistance. Another thing that happens is that people assume that I'm new. So quick story time, I went to a mountain bike event a couple years ago. This was the pilot year for their adaptive program. They had some support riders. Support riders were kind of newer to this realm. And I just remember somebody kind of asking me right away, like, okay, so we're going to ride this green trail, right? Because you're new at this. I'm thinking, you have no idea what my riding experience is. You didn't ask me riding experience, but you assume because I'm a person with a disability and I'm in this adaptive program that I'm a newer rider and that I'm going to ride a green trail, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with riding a green trail. For those that don't know, there are trail ratings for mountain biking. And so green is the easier type of trail or the easiest trail. And there's nothing wrong with, riding a green trail at all. But in my particular instance and case, that's not the riding level that I was riding at. I actually wanted to try a blue, and I kind of wanted to push my skills. So, that's something is people just always assume if I show up in this space that I'm new. And then, kind of going back to that help, people assume if there's an adaptive program, if there's adaptive riders, that they need to step in and they need to help, and that a support rider is a prerequisite to ride. Well, I'm going to share something with you. I am paralyzed. I don't have the use of my legs, but actually I go out on rides all the time by myself, right? I went on one this week. I went on 2 last week. I don't need a support rider to ride every single time I'm on the bike. I need a support rider in specific instances or specific cases, right? And I only need help when I need help. Me being disabled doesn't connotate that I'm always in need of help or always in need of assistance. And so these assumptions that people bring with them, albeit very well intentioned, often take away from a joyful experience, because suddenly what's supposed to be this really fun thing turns into, oh geez, like here we are with kind of these preconceived, ableist notions around how persons with disabilities interact with the world around them. And so these experiences have kind of resulted in me sometimes, not riding with specific adaptive organizations or being a part of specific adaptive riding programs, because I don't know if when I show up in this place and space, if these kind of, preconceived notions or ideologies are going to be present. And it's also why I spend a lot of time, riding with myself or riding with those that are kind of in a smaller, close-knit circle with me. And I know that people mean well, and I know that it's really well-intentioned, but I just really want to emphasize that it takes away from that joyful experience. It takes away from me being able to connect with nature and just be outside. So, oftentimes when we're at adaptive events or spaces or rides, there's this emphasis on safety. There's this emphasis on matching individuals with equipment and how individuals are going to interface with their equipment. And everybody is so worried about safety. Everybody's worried. And everybody's so worried about, how people are going to be connecting with their bikes. And a lot of that is extremely important, right? And I don't want to take away from it, because it is important that you are sitting well in your equipment and you are confident in it. But we spend so much time on the positioning. We spend so much time on safety. And then we're going like 2 miles an hour. And that's just like not a lot of fun for me, right? Like I want to feel like I'm outdoors. I want to be outdoors. And I want to have the same experiences that able-bodied individuals are having outdoors, right? And like, remember, I have experience, mountain biking outside of having my disability. And so when I would show up in those spaces for clinics, we didn't spend a whole bunch of time talking about safety or positioning or equipment. We did spend a necessary amount of time talking about, gear and safety checks, but there wasn't this huge emphasis on, safety and how to support each other. So I just want to kind of remind folks that I'm coming at this topic from 2 different perspectives, and I'm trying to bring the same experiences I had when I was able-bodied to the adaptive sports world and to the adaptive mountain biking world. I want to see, more joy in the adaptive mountain biking space. I want to see more fun rides. I want people to know that you can just ride and have fun, and that being outside is enough. You don't need to be racing. You don't need to be on a Paralympic track. You don't need to be training. You don't need to even know what the gear is or what it's called. I think it's just important that you're outside and you're experiencing joy. I want to kind of strip away from this idea that individuals with disabilities are patients. I want to strip away from this medical kind of ideology. I want to strip away from caretaking or support riders thinking that their whole job is to take care of the adaptive riders. I want people to see the riders and individuals for who they are. And once again, I know safety is important, but I want people to be outside and I want people to love it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, how we can incorporate joy into this space. So here's some little tidbits here, and just kind of as a side note, today's workshop will probably be a little bit on the shorter side. I don't anticipate we'll get to an hour, so you'll have time to get on with your lives and experience more joy in the outdoors. How can we incorporate joy? Well, I'm going to be touching on these 4 points today. Don't just focus on physical disabilities of the riders. Train your support riders to be hands off. Don't assume folks don't know what they're doing, right? And then focus on having fun. So let's kind of hit on this first point here. Don't just focus on our physical disabilities. And so one of the things I noticed that, when entering this adaptive space and entering adaptive events is there's this idea that we as adaptive riders are, there's kind of like a hierarchy that ensues, right? And as adaptive riders, we're the population that, these organizations are serving. And everything is focused on our disability and our classification and, our medical history. And I have applied to do, like a sit skiing program. So skiing, at a resort. And the intake form was just like, tell me about your medical history. Tell me the last time you had a surgery. What medications are on? Do you have, these medical conditions? Do you have this? Do you have that? Who's your emergency contact? I mean, it was like almost like a form that you would see when you're going to a new primary care physician. It was a lot, right? And so if you are in a position where you're designing, course intake forms or program intake forms or even ride intake forms, think about the verbiage that you're using and think about ways that you can gain information about your riders. And you might want to know what disability they have, right? But without asking for a full-on medical history, right? And so there are different ways that you can think about the verbiage and how you can communicate that. I like to ask people, what's your riding experience, right? And that'll allow me to understand what somebody's experience has been previously. And that also allows people to say, oh, well, I went to this camp or I did this. This is the kind of equipment I use. And then I also ask folks, what type of equipment or, do you need to be successful, or how do you interface with your biking equipment? And what that's allowing me to understand is like, how does this person use their equipment, right? Is it an upright bike? Do they have a prosthetic, attachment on their bike, or, what that kind of looks like? And then also I always put, is there anything anything we should know about how you ride a bike, right? And that allows people to say, oh, well, actually I need to take a break, or I need to be, close to restrooms every 45 minutes, or, things like that. There are ways you can also ask about issues like, are there any, dietary restrictions that can allow somebody to tell you a little bit more about their history? But, I really kind of scoff when we get into like the full classification kind of conversation for a 1 hour ride or a 1 hour clinic. I understand that you might be in a position where you have insurance or liability, and maybe you feel like you need to ask some of these questions, but think about a way to ask the questions that's inclusive and doesn't immediately put that participant in this kind of space where there's a hierarchy and that they're, kind of viewed as like a medical patient. So this is the second point, and this is, in my opinion, a very, very, very important point. And it's, train your support riders to be hands off. And this is challenging because a lot of times you might not have a lot of opportunity to train your support riders, right? They might be volunteers. Maybe you're a support rider for your friend, right? But I think it's really important to, start with the premise of, you are there to help somebody if they need help, right? And just because somebody shows up doesn't intrinsically mean they need help. Wait until somebody asks you for help. Wait until that person signals they need help. There's always like going to be a situation where maybe like that's not the the case. Like somebody rolls down a hill, somebody tips over and falls. So there are ways, or there are specific instances in which this does not apply. But I think kind of starting off your interactions with, you're there to be a hands-off person. You're a shadow rider. You can be a friend here in this instance, but don't just go around, touching bikes and touching people without their consent, right? So wait for somebody to ask for help. Wait to, put your hands on bikes, etc. I can't tell you how frustrating it's been when, I'm chugging along on a trail about to get somewhere, and then somebody either physically touches my bike or moves me out of the way or stops me from going to a feature because they assume that I need a level of support, and that might not be the case. And in that same vein, if I do need help, I will most likely verbalize what type of help I need. Now, this is like, I guess almost my third season as an adaptive rider. So I have a lot of experience in understanding where and how I need help. For newer riders, they might not be able to verbalize or signal in the same manner that they need help, right? They might not be aware that they need help. But I would say in that circumstance, just be in constant communication with your riders if you're a support rider, and kind of understand, what the person needs. And then once again, it's really important to not touch people's bikes, to not touch individuals until they signal that that's okay. And I know that sounds really obvious, right? But I can't tell you how many people kind of rush and put their hands on my bike when I'm in a circumstance that I need help. And I haven't necessarily had the time to say, okay, this is how I need help, and this is what I need you to do to support me. So this is a really big one. Don't assume folks don't know what they're doing. And what I mean by this is, don't assume everyone's a beginner. Don't assume that somebody is having trouble if they're moving slowly or if they're doing something. And I say this because if you're riding with a bunch of your able-bodied friends down a trail, you're not scrutinizing every single move they make, right? If somebody breaks or somebody rides slowly, you're like, that's their choice. That's their prerogative. They don't need necessarily help. But what I find is, kind of with that hierarchy that happens in these adaptive rides, like an adaptive rider might stop for a second or might slow down, and people automatically assume that there's something wrong, there's something need to be fixed, or that the person doesn't know what they're doing. And that's not always the case, right? Like sometimes we're just living life. This is something that happens like quite frequently too to disabled individuals, especially that use mobility aids out in public, right? So a big thing that happens to me is I'll be transferring from my wheelchair into a taxi cab, and people just assume that I do not know what I'm doing. They start to grab me, they start to put hands on me. They start to do all sorts of things, all of these theatrics, right? And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, can you give me a minute? Like, I know what I'm doing. It might just take my body a little bit longer, right? So I think that's really important. And kind of like on the timing thing, like, just like learn to be patient around individuals, and especially around individuals with disability. Like, our bodies work differently. We have different ways of interfacing with our environments. It's not going to be in the same linear fashion as able-bodied people. So instead of just assuming we need help at every single step of the way, just let us do what we're doing. And then if we ask for help, then you can step in and ask, what do you need for help? Another point on like, don't assume folks don't know what they're doing. This is also one of those things like where people will approach me and just immediately assume that I'm a novice rider or that I don't know what I'm doing. So I was at Trail System the other week, and this person rolls up to me in the parking lot and they were like, oh, like, what are you doing out here? Are you going to go ride that on the service road? And I'm like, no, I'm actually not going to ride it on the service road. I'm actually riding one of the trails. And when I said I'm riding, X trail, I mean, they just couldn't believe it. They were like, "You're riding that trail and you're not riding the service road. Are you going to be able to do that?" And I'm just like, I just thought that the way that that person approached me was just really odd and kind of out of pocket. It's like, do you go up to everybody and say that, or do you just assume that they know what they're doing, right? And so it's really important that you treat people with respect and autonomy, and just assume everybody knows what they're doing, and kind of just like mind your own business. I think is really what the key is here, but. Especially, I think individuals with disability might be a little bit more sensitive to this, because oftentimes people think that we don't know how to do something or that we immediately need help. So it can be a triggering thing when you assume that somebody doesn't know how to do something or how to interface with their environment. This is a really, really big one, and maybe the most important thing, but always focus on having fun in your programming. If your programming is not centered around having fun, I don't want to be a part of it. No. But I think it is really important, because, I've been in circumstances or rides or situations where everybody's so worried about our safety. They're so worried about how we're going to interface with our equipment. They're worried about the support riders. They're worried about the trail detours, the features. And it's like, we're going 2 miles an hour, and it's just like not a fun experience at all. And so, like, let's just take it a step back and remember that we're out here to have fun. So if you're an able-bodied mountain biker or cyclist, think about, why do you go outside? What draws you to being outdoors? What draws you to biking? What is that draw to that? And think that could be the same draw for a person with a disability, right? We just want to be outside. We just want to have fun. We just want to experience nature. And unfortunately, because of the way the world is built and the systems and equipment, we might need help. But in an ideal world, none of us would get help from y'all. Like, I mean, for real, like, I love to ride with my friends, but I don't want to be in a situation where I need help, right? Like, I'd love to be able to just be autonomous. But at the same time, I understand, like, help is integral to, sometimes my progression as a rider, or to me having a good experience. So, when I go sit skiing, I'm in a ski bucket, and I'm not a very good sit skier. I'm a novice. So I have to have a person behind me holding on to my buggy or my sit ski, and, navigating me down the mountain, or, on a leash and a tether. Right. And that's, this like kind of symbiotic relationship that I have to have with my, my support guide. Right. It's like, there has to be a high level of trust there, but I still want it to be have fun. I don't want it to be this hierarchy between this person that has all the power and me just being at the mercy of it, right? The experience is for me in the outdoors. They just happen to be there because they are enabling that experience, right? So I think just really, 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 really think about ways to focus on having fun. One of the things that I say is, like, let's think about kind of the somatics of being outdoors, right? So thinking about how your participants are feeling, and what they're feeling when they're out there, what they are seeing. And when you're riding, what are you seeing, what they're hearing, what they're thinking, how they're being. Taking kind of that at heart, I think, is really important. So I'm, for instance, like, I'm going to host, 2 Camp Dirts this year, and Camp Dirt is really about that experience, right? It's really about being out in nature and enjoying it and feeling it and laughing and having fun. And bikes are the tool that allow us to be in nature, but we're not competitive about it. We're not trying to get a certain number of miles a day. It's not this big endurance feat. This is just the modality by which we're going to, like, have joy, right? And so focus on having fun. I think like some of the adaptive rides I've been on have been, like, very stressful, because there's all of these, like, moving pieces and logistics, and people are so worried about the rider's safety. They are so worried about all of these things that, like, here I am as the participant, and I'm just like, wow, this is, like, this is not the experience that I wanted. Like, I want to have the same experience that my able-bodied friends have when they go on a group ride, right? Like, people aren't checking in every 2 seconds. Like, are you okay? Like, are you doing all right? Like, how you doing? Like, no, we're just like riding and having a good time. And so I think it's really important. I think it's really important that you treat individuals with disabilities as people first and foremost. We just happen to have a disability. We happen to be moving in the world differently, but we are humans. And we are, we have intrinsic value. We have intrinsic value. And I think that kind of stepping away from some of these other ways of thinking about these adaptive programs is going to allow you to focus and have fun. Because once again, like I've been a part of lots of different programs and lots of different conversations about this. And I see a lot of joy lacking in the planning process. I never really hear people talking about centering, having fun, or the participants' joy. People just always immediately start to get bogged down into the details and logistics of, okay, well, how are we going to support a wheelchair user? How are we going to support an individual on crutches? Or how are we going to, transfer here and transfer there? And it's just like, whoa, hold on a second. Let's start from a place where we are planning on focusing on having fun and being joyful in the outdoors. And another thing, and I have to kind of take a step back. Like this is one of my more passionate presentations and workshops, and I'd say it's I don't know if it's controversial, but it's more poignant, right? I'm talking about some real issues in the space. I think we've spent a lot of time getting to know about the ins and outs of planning inclusive rides, how to support adaptive riders, but this is the core of the experience, right? Is adaptive mountain bike joy. How do we cultivate and how do we create those experiences? So, I think it's really important that we, obviously never stop thinking about safety. Safety is always important in the outdoors. But just remember, individuals with disabilities, they're not made of glass. We are people with real feelings. Treat us as humans and not something else. So here's a really, really big ask of mine is that you start to integrate your spaces. So, and what I mean by that is there are affinity spaces, right? An affinity space would be a space like Camp Dirt, where it is a space specifically created and curated for adaptive and para off-road cyclists, individuals with disabilities, right? It is a space created for them and by a person with a disability, right? And that is great. And I think it's really important that we have and maintain affinity spaces. But my big ask is that you start to integrate these spaces. If you are hosting a festival or a program, think about ways to bring individuals with disabilities into the community, right? We're not separate. And in so many ways, a lot of experience that I've had as a wheelchair user the last 4 years is isolating, right? People are always like, oh, we don't know how to accommodate you. Oh, like we're not set up to host you. Oh, there's stairs here. Oh, you can't come into my house, or, oh, it's just too hard, right? And so my experience has been very isolating. I have to spend a lot of time working with the people I know to instill confidence so that I can be in these spaces, or working with organizations so that more people feel welcome, right? But how about we think about ways to integrate individuals with disabilities into our communities as is, right? Once again, affinity spaces are extremely important. They have their value. They should be cherished. But if you are not kind of in that world, and if you don't have a disability yourself, and you were thinking about how to bring para off-road cyclists or adaptive riders into your scene, think about integrating. So I went to a very, very, very large mountain bike festival, and they had an adaptive program. And that adaptive program was essentially all adaptive riders riding only with adaptive riders, not talking to any of the other able-bodied individuals, not being integrated into any other forms of programming, not being able to get around the festival grounds without any help. So loss of autonomy, loss of independence, isolating. I mean, I was like, wow, that wasn't the experience. Like, I could have just gotten 4 of my adaptive friends and I to go camping, and we probably would have had a better experience because we were then centered, right? And so that was not a good experience. And so when people come to me and they say, hey, we're thinking about doing an adaptive program at this festival or event, what should we do? And this is one of my number one asks is integrate us into your rides. Like, it's important to have maybe a separate, affinity ride. But by and large, your adaptive riders should be riding with your able-bodied riders all the time at all levels, skill levels. They should be integrated into all of your experiences, right? Like, we are not separate. We are equal, right? So don't create separate spaces for us. Bring us into these equal spaces. Bring us into the spaces where able-bodied people are, right? If you have a dance floor, make sure we can get on the dance floor. If you have bathrooms that are accessible from the dance floor, make sure we can get to the dance floor. AKA deep gravel at some of these festivals, not gonna work. Or if you're thinking about how are we gonna integrate these disabled riders into, our already planned out rides? Figure it out. Pay a consultant, get somebody, a coordinator that is going to find a way to integrate people into these experiences. Because when I am looking to come to your event as an adaptive rider, I'm looking to be a part of it. I don't want to be separate. I don't want to be shoved off into the corner in my own separate tent with my own separate crew. I want to be out there with everybody. I want to feel like a full person that, once again, has intrinsic value outside of this adaptive program or outside of the scholarship that I've been given, right? It's really, really, really important, I think, to think about how to integrate people into your communities, into your scene. This, I think, might be the last point. And as I mentioned today, we're cutting out early. School's out early for the summer. No, it's just our last workshop, and this is one that typically is a little bit more interactive. So this is a really, really, really big point, and I want this to be also central to how you view adaptive programs, how you view adaptive sports, how you view people with disabilities. Disabled people are not tragedies, right? It's not a tragedy to have a disability. It's not a poor experience. It's not something to be sorry of. It's not something to look down upon. It is just simply a fact of life, right? There's always this example that goes around, like, needing glasses, for instance, right? Like, glasses are a piece of adaptive technology, or, something that helps you see. Not being able to see is, is it technically a disability, right? Thinking about folks with hearing aids, right? Hearing aids and glasses have been a lot more integrated into kind of our, I guess, like everyday, society, whereas folks with wheelchairs who use prosthetics or have other conditions might not be as integrated into kind of like everyday what you see on the street and what's being represented. But, we're all just humans, and disability just happens to be a part of our identities, but we exist outside of our disabilities. We exist as humans and people in general. It's really important when you're centering joy to take away that power dynamic, right? Like, once again, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into an adaptive sports world where the support riders and the organizers are able-bodied and they are at a higher level than the individuals with disabilities. And I am a person that intrinsically needs help. I am a tragedy. People start to ask about what happened to me, start to compare their experiences with mine. Like, this is just because you meet a person on the trail or you're leading this event is not an opportunity to trauma dump. It's not the opportunity to, comment on people's equipment and say, oh, I wish I had that. I could use a break. Like, ha, ha, ha. Like, my legs are tired. I wish I could be sitting down, right? Like, and it's not an experience to tell somebody, oh, I broke my ankle one time and used a wheelchair for a week, so I totally know what it's like. Or, my neighbor had cerebral palsy, so I know all about, adaptive riders, and it's just so good for you to be out here, right? Like, just kind of maybe check yourself a little bit when you're doing that, because that kind of notion takes away from me being able to have fun. Like, and I tell you, every single time I go on a ride, without fail, something like this happens, right? I have somebody ask me, like, oh, well, good for you for being out here. Well, you're so brave, or you're such an inspiration, or, seeing you out here makes me realize my problems aren't as bad, or, I was feeling bad about myself, and then I'm seeing you out here and now I feel better. Like, I don't know. I think people mean well when they say these things, but geez, like, it would be nice to go on a ride and not have all of this additional commentary, and like not have all of this stuff and feel like a spectacle and feel like a tragedy and some tragic case or some triumphant case that's like risen from some metaphorical ashes to be on the trail to grace your presence so you feel good about yourself, right? Like, I just, like, it's a lot. So, like, disabled people are not tragedies. We are just people that happen to have a disability, happen to be outdoors, happen to be interfacing, with our equipment and the landscape in a different way. And so, like, let's keep this front and center, right? Like, this is so important when interacting with people with disabilities. Like, just play it cool. I want to go back a little bit to, like, this part, and just to kind of recap, because we're getting close to the end here, but, like, once again, like, as I said before, this is kind of, I don't know if it's a controversial topic or what, but these are more of like my real kind of like unfettered feelings about this space and being in this space and what I've observed the last 4 years, and kind of my gripes around like how we can move forward as a community to integrate people into our spaces that's not, demeaning and not infantilizing and not othering. And so, like, let's kind of talk about this a little bit more, but like, don't focus just on people's physical disabilities. When thinking about the intake forms, thinking about ways to strip away but still get the information, train your support riders to be hands-off. They're just there to help individuals with disabilities. That's all. And we don't intrinsically need help because we're disabled. Don't assume that we don't know what we're doing, and focus on just having fun. That's like the number one thing, is focus on having fun. Find ways to plan that joy into your ride for people. And I think too, like, if you're unclear of like how to do these things, like how do we focus on our intake forms, or how do we train our support riders, or like how do we reduce our bias, either how do we focus on fun? I think you need to bring more disabled people into the space and integrate individuals with disabilities into the planning process so that you can focus on these things. Because I see a lot of spaces, I see a lot of programs that are run by able-bodied individuals. And I know some of them are run really great, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm so thankful for my friends that are able-bodied, that have this and champion this as their mission. But I also, on the other flip side of the coin, and more often than not, I see spaces like this where this kind of stuff is running rampant, right? And so this is a call to bring more individuals with disabilities into this space, to have more leadership positions, to be speaking on authority. And, if you're unsure, talk to somebody that's disabled and have them tell you what they need, right? And don't just assume that somebody doesn't know what they're doing, or that you have to save them, right? So let's go back to the end here. Once again, I told you it was going to be a little bit shorter today. I've done this course, previously in person, and in this course previously, we kind of reviewed one of the last workshops on how to support a rider, so we could talk about those different points in which you can reduce your bias and incorporate more joy into your safety checks and your physical spotting. the big thing that I always end all of my workshops on, and kind of my motto here, is it doesn't matter what you ride or how you ride. It just matters that you're outside and you're experiencing joy. So I want to, say thank you to everybody that's shown up week after week. Thank you to folks that are showing up remotely at a later date. It's a huge privilege of mine to be able to share this knowledge and to be in a space where I can do this. And I love to do this. So kind of as like next steps, right? I think this year, Dirtbound has 2 camps that we're hosting. We're going to do an activation at Mid-South Gravel Race with the Para Collective. So if you're in town for that, go and check out the lunch that Dirtbound is going to be sponsoring. We also are planning some community days in California. And I am thinking about ways that we can continue this education as well. So if you have like topics you want to learn about, you can drop them in this comment box, or you can reach out to me personally, because I'm always interested in knowing what people want to learn about and how they want to interface with this content. But once again, I really appreciative of everyone showing up, and really appreciative of everyone being open to thinking about how to incorporate joy and really center joy in adaptive mountain biking and in outdoor experiences. Last but not least, where's my other one? Thank you to our big supporter, SRAM. SRAM is our big financial supporter for Dirtbound this year. So without SRAM, none of this would be possible. So excited because of SRAM. Our 2 Dirtbound camps are going to be able to happen, and other activations throughout the year. So thank you so much. Also, thank you to my own personal sponsors, Sierra Nevada, Shimmy Butter, Bowhead, Untapped, Ergon, Darko. All y'all make it possible for me to show up in this space. And that's kind of the end. So I'm going to run it back to the beginning. I will stay on until 20, so 6 minutes. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any. If not, you know where to find me on Instagram at Geodesic Dome or at dirtbound.cycling, and reach out with any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the music on, type a chat if you want. Once again, thank you so much, everyone, for showing up. It's been such a huge privilege to be able to do these presentations the last couple months. All right, folks, I don't see any more questions, but thank you so much. It's been so awesome being able to do this workshop series. Thank you, everyone, and I'll see you in a couple months, and we might do, well, hopefully I'll see some of y'all sooner than that, but I'll see you on YouTube live in a couple months with Dirtbound. And in the meantime, stay safe, be well, stay warm, and we'll see each other out on the trails.